Sir, have you observed, right? Up to this we covered all 4 drivers. So in JDBC, if any person is asking how many types of drivers are there, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. In the last 4 or 5 videos, we covered what is the architecture, what are the advantages, limitations of each driver, what is the functionality we covered, right? Now let me summarize all the 4 diagrams on a single snap so that you people can able to remember well. Have a look once, sir. Sir, here this is architecture diagrams of all JDBC drivers. Sir, all the 4 drivers are already there on the screen so that you people can get much clarity at a time, right? Just observe that. So I will explain very briefly just type 1 driver. You know already all these things, right? Java application, type 1 driver communicates with the ODBC driver communicates with the database. Have you observed, right? Type 1 driver, I mean Java application communicates with the type 1 driver communicates with the ODBC driver communicates with the database. Type 1 driver converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls. ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Remember, how many conversions are required, sir? 2 conversions are required. 2 levels of conversion is required. Remember, performance is going to be affected, right? Sir, these are type 1 driver never recommended to use. What is the reasons for that? One is performance is down. Next, internally type 1 driver depends on ODBC driver. ODBC driver concept applicable only for Windows machine. Automatically, my type 1 driver can work only for Windows machines. Are you getting? That's why this driver, okay, not at all recommended to use. Another reason is also there, sir, for the type 1 driver. Type 1 driver provided by Sun Microsystems as a part of JDK, but from 1.8 version onwards, no such type of support. Sir, until 1.7 version only, type 1 driver is there. That's why type 1 driver not at all recommended to use. Are you able to identify 3 reasons, right? One is, sir, 2 conversions are required, performance is down. Second one is, type 1 driver can work only for Windows platform because internally it uses ODBC driver. Third one, no support from 1.8 version. Because of that, this type of driver not at all recommended to use. This driver is snail driver because it's a very slowest driver, sir, because of 2 level conversions. Like this driver is the worst, not recommended to use. That's all. Next, after that, we discussed about type 2 driver also. Very simple, sir. Type 2 driver, sir, converts JDBC calls into database specific native library calls. Regarding, sir, JDBC calls into database specific native library calls, sir, which can be able to understand by database. But the problem with this BLATE driver is, it is database dependent driver, it is platform dependent driver. If you change a platform, you require to change the driver. If you change a database, you require to change the driver. That's why, because it is both the platform dependent and database dependent driver. Because of this reason, this driver not at all recommended to use. Clear for all of it, sir? This is the diagram. Type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific native library calls, which can be understandable by database. Relatively performance is good, but the problem, database dependent, platform dependent. That's why this driver not at all recommended to use. Clear, right? Next, there are next 2 drivers are highly recommended to use, either type 3 or type 4. What about their architecture diagrams? Observe that, sir. Sir, this is about Java application. Java application communicates with the type 3 driver. Type 3 driver communicates with the middleware server, which is going to communicate with the database. Now functionality, observe how many components are there. Java application, type 3 driver, middleware server, and then database. Sir, type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls, right? 2 level conversions are required. But anyway, sir, the biggest advantage of this driver is it never communicates with the database. Regarding it never communicates communicates directly with the database. That's why it is a database independent driver. Next, this driver completely developed in Java, all Java net protocol driver. This driver is also known as all Java net protocol driver. So it is completely developed in Java. That's why here, do you know, so platform independent nature by default will be there, sir. Sir, out of all four driver, only driver which is a database independent, which is the platform independent, is this driver only. That's why highly recommended to use this driver for our applications, right? Even some minor limitations are there. Only two limitations, right? One is performance is low because two level conversions are required. Second problem here is we require to buy middleware server. That's why cost of this driver is high when compared with the other. But anyway, by ignoring these two limitations, sir, advantages why database independent, platform independent. That's why this driver highly recommended to use. Clear for all of it? Next, I covered about type 4 driver also. There is a biggest advantage of type 4 driver, sir. Type 4 driver communicates directly with the database. It never going to use ODBC driver, or it never going to use database specific libraries or middleware server like the remaining drivers, right? Remember, Java application communicates with the type 4 driver, type 4 driver communicates with the database. So type 4 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific calls. So it is directly converted into database specific calls. Performance is too good, sir. Okay, next, type 4 driver never require any extra component to communicate with the database. That's why it is also known as a thin driver. Next, this type 4 driver, okay, directly completely developed in Java. That's why it is platform independent driver. Sir, if any person is asking, can you please tell advantages of type 4 driver? Multiple advantages, right? It is a thin driver. It won't require any extra component. It is platform independent driver because it is developed only in Java. Next, and after that, performance wise good because directly communicate with the database. Next, security is more because internally it uses native protocol provided by database vendor. Clear? But only one small limitation is there for this type 4 driver. What is that limitation? Is type 4 driver. Type 4 driver directly communicates with the database. That's why it is one database dependent driver. Remember, except that small limitation, we never going to worry about, sir, the remaining, sir. It's a biggest advantages are multiple things are there. That's why type 4 driver is highly recommended to use. Type 3 driver highly recommended to use. Type 1 and type 2 drivers never recommended to use. Clear for all of it? These are architecture diagrams, right? What is the diagram? What is the functionality? What are the advantages? What are the limitations? Like compulsory you people should have clear clarity. Right? Just go through the previous videos so that you people can get much clarity about each driver. Clear for all of it? Sir, up to this, it is a very clear for you people. How many types of drivers are there? What are architecture diagrams, functionality, limitations and advantages, right? Then it's a very common doubt, very common interview question. Which driver recommended to use? Regarding whether it is the type 1 or type 2 or type 3 or type 4. Okay, usually generalized conclusion you may have. So type 1, type 2 driver not recommended, but type 3, type 4 are recommended to use. When exactly we should go for type 3? When exactly we should go for type 4, type 2, type 1? I will explain, sir. Sir, very simple, sir. In my project, I'm using only one database. Okay, maybe I'm using only Oracle database. Assume that most of the times, small scale web applications or standalone applications, we are always going to use one type of database only. It may be Oracle or it may be MySQL. Like in our project, in our application, if we are using only one database, only one type of database, we never going to change our database. Highly recommended we should go for type 4 driver. Are you getting that? Okay, in our application, if we are using only one type of database, maybe Oracle or MySQL, like highly recommended we should go for one type 4 driver. Best examples are standalone applications, Standalone applications, the applications we are running on single machine. Standalone applications are small scale web applications. Small scale web applications. Small standalone applications, small scale web application. For these kind of things, type 4 driver is the best suitable, sir. Remember. So what is the conclusion, sir? In our application, if we are using only one type of database, it may be Oracle or MySQL, better to go for type 4 driver because we require to use that particular database specific type 4 driver, right? So because we never going to change our database, so database is always fixed, this driver is always fixed irrespective of any platform. Type 4 driver is always going to work because type 4 driver is the platform independent driver. For any platform, no problem at all, same type 4 driver is going to work. Sir, suppose assume that I'm working on big enterprise applications, sir. Assume that mobile application, Airtel application, or any telecom application, Airtel application, Idea application, or Geo application. In that, lakhs of customers will be there. Customers' information I have to store in the Oracle database, but the bill information, calls information, I have to store in the Sybase database. Observe that. Sir, if it is a big enterprise application, we may require to work with multiple databases, right? Sometimes to store customer information, one type of database. To store, bill information, calls information, we should go for another type of database. Correct or not? Okay? So, that is, if you are working with multiple databases, never recommended to use type 4 drivers, sir. Highly recommended we should go for what? Type 3 driver. Are you getting right? Highly recommended we should go for what? Type 3 driver. Because type 3 driver, the biggest advantage is for all databases, only one driver is enough. Because type 3 driver is a database independent driver. Are you getting? For all MySQL, Oracle, DB2, Sybase. For you can use 10 different types of databases. How many type 3 drivers are required? Only one. Because type 3 driver is database independent driver. Remember that. That's why in our project, if we are using multiple databases, highly recommended we should go for what? Type 3 driver. Clear, right? Okay. Sir, can you give an example? Best example, large scale web applications. Are you getting? Large scale web applications, right? Big web applications, if we are going to do, then we should go for large scale web applications. And sir, enterprise applications, right? And enterprise applications, happily we can go for type 3 driver, right? Are you able to understand? So, in our project, if we are using only one type of database, type 4 driver is the recommended. If we are using multiple databases, better to go for what? Type 3 driver. Okay, like? Sir, sometime for my database, type 3 driver not available, type 4 driver not available, then automatically type 4 is not there, type 3 is not there, then obviously we should go for type 2 driver. So, when we are choosing type 2 driver, sir, if type 4 or type 3 not available, then only we should go for type 2. Because no good driver, then we have to satisfy with the existing driver only, right? That's why, sir, type 2 driver, right? Next, 2 worst, sir. If type 4, type 3, type 2, no other driver is available for my database. Very specific database, sir. Assume that Durga database. Okay? Tomorrow I want to develop my own database, Durga database. For this, only type 1 driver support only there. Type 2, type 3, type 4 is not there. Then, if no other driver is available, then for type 1 driver, Pandagana. Okay? Then we should go for which driver, sir? Type 1 driver, right? I hope it's a very clear. If the interview person is asking, sir, which driver is required to use in which scenarios? Very clear. In our project, if we are using only one type of database, better to go for type 4 driver because type 4 driver is a database specific platform independent driver. For standalone applications, for small scale web applications, highly recommended to go for what? Type 4 driver, right? Next, in our project, if we are working with multiple databases, okay, like big enterprise applications, large scale web application, then we should go for type 3 driver because type 3 driver is database independent driver. Clear, right? Next, what about type 2 drivers are? If for type 4 and type 3 not available, then we should go for one type 2 driver. Clear? If type 4, type 3, type 2 not available, then we can go for one type 1 driver, right? Clear for all of you, right? So which driver required to you, in which scenario you should be in a position to give left and right to the interviewer side. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, just let me summarize the notes so that you will get much clarity, right? Have a look once. Sir, which driver okay should be used? Sir, if we are using only one type of database in our application, then it is recommended to you type 4 driver. That particular database specific type 4 driver we have to use, because type 4 driver is a database dependent driver. Okay, examples are standalone applications, small scale web applications, right? Next, if we are using multiple types of databases in our application, then type 3 driver is recommended to use. Sir, it is a large scale web application, enterprise web application, compulsory we should go for one type 3 driver, right? Next, if type 3 and type 4 drivers are not available, then only we should go for one type 2 driver. So type 3 support is not there, type 4 support is not there, then obviously we should go for type 2 only. Then last one, have you observed, right? If no other driver is available, then type 1 driver is going to enjoy, sir. Then we should go for one type 1 driver. Remember that. But anyway, at the generalizer point, don't use type 1 and type 2. Better to use type 4 and type 3 drivers only. Clear, right? Hi friends, in the last videos we covered what is driver, how many types of drivers are there, what is the functionality and architecture of each driver, what are various advantages and limitations of each driver. Next, which driver should be used, like we covered multiple videos only on types of drivers, right? Next, related to this drivers concept, there is one more very important interview question is there. Let me talk about that. Sir, we can use sometimes you may heard thin driver. Even I used in the last video this word thin driver and a thick driver. Are you getting right? Sir, what is the difference between thin driver and a thick driver? Are you getting what is the difference between thin driver, thick driver? Maybe a chance to ask. What is the thin? Thin means what? Light weighted. Are you getting that? Light, very light component. Are you getting thin? Thick. What is the meaning of thick, sir? Thick means what? Okay, heavy weight component or fatty component. Are you getting that? Fat component. That is called thick component, right? Sir, with respect to JDBC drivers, what is a thin driver? What is the thick driver, sir? Sir, very simple. Type 1, type 2, type 3 drivers are called thick drivers. Type 4 driver is called thin driver. Okay, observe that. Type 1, 2, 3 are called thick drivers. Type 4 is called thin driver. Sir, you are using the word directly 1, 2, 3 are called thick and 4 is called thin. But what is the meaning of thick driver or what is the meaning of thin driver? First observe that. Sir, very simple. If the driver to communicate with the database, if the driver requires some extra component, are you getting that? Okay. So if the driver requires some extra component to communicate with the database, okay, such type of drivers are called thick drivers, right? Okay. In the case of type 1 driver internally depends on ODBC driver. Sir, with the help of ODBC driver, it can communicate with the database. Suppose ODBC driver is not there, then type 1 driver can't work. Remember that. I hope I covered in the architecture diagrams in the last examples, right? Same way, if we consider type 2 driver to communicate with the database, compulsory database vendor provided native libraries compulsory should be there on the client machine. Otherwise, it can't communicate with the database. Correct, right? Next, type 3 driver. To communicate with the database, compulsory middleware server must be required. So, if the driver software required some extra component to communicate with the database, such type of drivers are called thick drivers, right? Are you able to understand? Sir, my driver required some extra component, then only it can communicate with the database. Such type of drivers are called what? Thick drivers, right? But type 4 driver, it won't require any components, sir. Directly it can communicate with the database, correct, right? It won't require any component. Type 4 driver, without taking support of any other component, directly it can communicate with the database. If the driver won't require any extra component to communicate with the database, such type of driver is called a thin driver, right? Of course, can you give an example for the thin driver, sir? The thin driver, type 4 driver, right? Clear for all of it? Sir, can you please repeat once again? What is a thick driver? What is the thin driver? If the driver software required some extra component to communicate with the database, such type of driver is called thick driver. If the driver software won't require any extra component, directly it can communicate with the database, such type of driver is called what? Thin driver. In the interview, sometimes maybe a chance of asking, what is the meaning of thick driver, or what is the meaning of thin driver? Which are thick drivers, which are thin drivers? You should be in a position to answer, right? Okay, just have a look once, sir. If you consider, this is my Java application, sir, all the drivers are there in front of you. It's a very helpful, sir. Sir, this is the Java application which internal uses JDBC. This is my database. Observe that this is itself is my database, right? Now, if it is a type 1 driver, type 1 Java application communicates with the type 1 driver. Type 1 driver communicates with the ODBC driver, which is going to communicate with the database. Are you getting? So, type 1 driver required ODBC driver to communicate with the database. That's why this driver is thick driver. Remember this one, because without taking extra component support, it can't communicate with the database. So, type 1 driver to work, compulsory ODBC driver must be required. Are you getting that? If the driver required extra component to communicate with the database, such type of driver is called what? Thick driver. Clear, right? Same way, type 2 driver, Java application communicates with the type 2 driver. Type 2 driver internally uses database specific native libraries. Have you remembered, right? Database specific native libraries, then which is going to communicate with the database. Are you getting? So, type 2 driver require native libraries, then only it can communicate with the database. That's why this driver is also thick driver, right? Next, type 3 driver required middleware server to communicate with the database. Correct or not? So, type 3 driver required middleware server to communicate with the database. That's why type 3 driver also thick driver, right? But if you observe type 4 driver directly communicate with the database. I'm not taking any extra component like ODBC driver or database specific native libraries or middleware server. This type 4 driver directly communicate with the database without taking any extra component support. That's why this driver is nothing but one thin driver. Are you in a position to understand, right? Sir, which drivers are thick drivers? Type 1, type 2, type 3 drivers are thick drivers. Type 4 driver is a thin driver. Clear, right? So, in the interview room, if any person is asking what is the difference between thick driver and a thin driver, okay? If the database driver requires some extra component to communicate with the database, such a type of driver is called a thick driver, okay? Example for the thick driver is type 1, type 2, type 3. If the database won't require, if driver software won't require any extra component to communicate with the database, if the driver directly can communicate with the database, such a type of drivers are called thin driver. Example for the thin driver is type 4 driver. Clear, right? Sir, maybe a chance to ask what is the difference between thick driver and a thin driver, or which are thick drivers, which are thin drivers. I hope it's clear for all of you, right? That's all. In the last video, we covered about what is a thin driver, what is the thick driver. Correct, right? We covered already. Sir, now there is another word I have to discuss about these drivers. Sometimes we may heard type 1 driver follows 2-tier architecture. Type 2 driver follows 2-tier architecture. Sir, type 3 driver follows 3-tier architecture. What is the meaning of 2-tier, 3-tier and n-tier? Like, let me talk about that. Sir, which driver follows which architecture? Compulsory, you people should have clarity, right? Sir, very, very simple. How many levels of missions are there? Sometimes, do you know, presentation tier, business tier, next and after the data integration, IAS, what we call database tier, like multiple tiers. Multiple tiers means what? Multiple levels. Remember this one. Presentation tier, okay, which always talks about presentation logic. Business tier, which is always talks about business logic. Database tier, which is always talks about database logic. Are you getting right? So this is levels we require to divide, missions we require to divide. Such a type of thing is nothing but tiers, tier architecture, right? Okay, even in our projects also, sir, project 2-tier architecture, 3-tier architecture, n-tier architecture, like you may have. Sir, very simple. As of now, at very basic level, tier means number of levels, sir. N-tier means n levels. 2-tier means 2 levels. Just easily you can able to remember. Now, observe that. In the case of, sir, here JDBC drivers, 2-tier versus 3-tier. Are you getting 2-tier versus 3-tier? Don't get shocked by seeing all the diagrams at a time. Don't get confused. Here, see this one. Here, the first one I'm talking about type driver, right? Sir, Java application, type 1 driver. Type 1 driver communicates with ODBC driver. ODBC driver communicates with the database. Correct or not? Okay. So this is the type 1. We covered multiple times by this type. Now observe this. Here, how many missions are there? Total, how many different possible missions are there? Very simple, sir. On the client mission, our Java program has to run. Type 1 driver should be there. ODBC driver should be there. Sir, on the client mission, how many things should be there? Java application, type 1 driver, ODBC driver. These 3 things are available on the client mission. Clear? Next, database, sir, it is locating on some other mission. Assume that worst scenario, it's locating on some other mission. Database server mission. Okay? Sir, in the case of type 1 driver, how many missions are required, sir? In the max, how many missions are required? 1 mission for database purpose, another mission for our Java program under type 1 driver and ODBC driver. Sir, this mission is the client mission. This mission is nothing but what? Database server mission. That's why total, how many tiers are there here? Client mission. Next one after that, second one is nothing but what? Database server mission. That's why it follows 2-tier architecture. Remember this one. Type 1 driver follows what? 2-tier architecture. Client tier, database tier. Are you getting that? Client mission, database mission. So type 1 driver follows 2-tier architecture. Clear for all of you, right? Next, similarly, let me talk about type 2 driver, sir. Even type 2 driver is also more or less same. Java application communicates with the type 2 driver. Type 2 driver convert JDBC calls into vendor specific native library calls, which can be understandable by database, right? Sir, here also, this Java application, type 2 driver and the vendor specific native libraries, all these things are available on which missions are? Client mission. Next, database is available on which missions are? Database server mission. Client tier, database tier. Or client mission, database mission. So, how many tiers are there for the type 2 driver? Once again, sir, it is follows 2-tier architecture. Remember this one, sir. So, type 2 driver also follows 2-tier architecture only, because, sir, max 2 levels are possible, 2 tiers are possible, right? But observe type 3 driver, right? Very, very important, sir. There is small difference there, observe. On the client mission, have you observed Java application, type 3 driver? Sir, Java application communicates with the type 3 driver. Type 3 driver can communicate with the middleware server by using network protocol. Next, middleware server can communicate with the database. Are you getting right? So total how many here observe? Java application and the type 3 driver locating on client machine. Middleware server may locate on different machine. That machine is by default considered as middleware server machine. Database is locating on different machine. That machine database server machine. Are you getting right? Sir, here client machine, middleware server machine, and database machine. Client tier, middleware server tier, database tier. How many tiers are there? Sir, 3 tiers. That's why type 3 driver follows 3 tier architecture. Remember this one, okay? Type 3 driver follows 3 tier architecture, right? Okay, because client machine, middleware server machine, and after that what? Database server machine. Total how many levels are there, sir? 3 levels, 3 tiers are there. That's why 3 tier architecture. What about fourth one, sir? Observe that. Type 4 driver. Type 4 driver is very simple, sir. Java application communicate with the type 4 driver. Type 4 driver communicate with the database directly. On the client machine, okay, client machine, Java application, type 4 driver will be there. On the database server machine, database server will be there. How many levels are there, sir? Only 2 levels. Client tier and the database server tier. That's why it follows 2 tier architecture. Remember this one. Are you getting right? So these are what is the meaning of which driver follows which architecture you people should aware. Type 1, type 2 and type 4 follows 2 tier architecture. But a type 3 driver follows 3 tier architecture. The only JDBC driver which follows a 3 tier architecture is type 3 driver only. Except a type 3 driver, all the remaining drivers follows 2 tier architecture only. Clear for all of you, right? Sir, in the interview room, in the worst scenario, type 1 driver follows 2 tier or 3 tier architecture. Immediately give left and right. Are you getting right? So except a type 3, all the remaining drivers follows 2 tier architecture. Type 3 driver follows 3 tier architecture. Clear for all of you, right? That's all. Sir, up to this we covered what are various JDBC drivers, functionality, architecture, advantages, limitations. Next, whether it is the thin driver or thick driver, or whether it is the 2 tier architecture, it follows 2 tier architecture or 3 tier architecture like. But now let me talk about all the summary, a small comparison table which is summarize all properties of all the 4 drivers, right? Okay, just observe that here comparison table of all JDBC drivers. Are you getting? What is that? Comparison table for all the drivers, right? Sir, now just with respect to which property I want to compare. I want to compare with respect to which property. Next, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, right? Observe that. Sir, here type 1 driver, if you consider, of course, conversion. I want to talk about what? Conversion property, right? Conversion, okay? Type 1 driver converts JDBC calls to ODBC calls. Correct or not? It will convert JDBC to ODBC, and then ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Clear, right? So type 1 driver converts JDBC calls to ODBC calls. But what about type 2 driver? Sir, whenever I am talking, immediately in your mind already, sir, the architecture diagram should be there. Sir, have you remember? From type 2 driver converts JDBC calls to native library calls, database specific native library calls, which can be understandable by database engine. Clear, right? Okay. Next, type 3 driver, sir. Type 3 driver means middleware server is there in the middle. Have you remembered, right? Type 3 driver converts JDBC calls to middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Have you observed? From JDBC calls to middleware server specific calls by type 3 driver is going to take care. What about type 4 driver, sir? Direct conversion from JDBC calls to database specific calls. From JDBC calls to database specific calls. Clear for all of it? right? So which driver responsible for which conversion, make sure you people should aware, right? Okay, next implemented in. Sir, this driver is developed only in Java or Java with some other languages, like sir, type 1 driver only in Java, because the reason is it is coming at the part of JDK, right? At the part of Java software only it's coming. Type 1 driver is developed only in Java, sir. But type 2 driver not developed in Java, Java with the native languages like C or C++. Remember this one, sir. Type 2 driver is not completely developed in Java. That's why it is not platform dependent. Platform independent, sir. It is not platform independent. It is a platform dependent driver. I hope you know, right? Next, type 3 and type 4. Both the drivers are developed only in Java. That's why it is also known as all Java net protocol driver, all Java native protocol driver, or it's also known as pure Java driver. So type 3, type 4 developed only in Java. That's why, sir, all Java drivers are these. Okay. Next, is it follows architecture, sir. 2-tier architecture or 3-tier architecture. Just now I covered, except type 3 driver, all the remaining drivers follows what? 2-tier architecture, but type 3 driver follows what? 3-tier architecture, right? Sir, type 1, 2-tier, for type 2, 2-tier, but type 3, 3-tier, right? 3-tier, but type 4, once again 2-tier only. Remember this one, once again it is 2-tier only. Okay, like so which driver follows 3-tier architecture? Only one driver follows 3-tier architecture, type 3 driver, right? Except type 3, all the remaining drivers follows what? 2-tier architecture only. Okay, what is the next one? Is it platform independent driver or platform dependent driver, sir? Sir, obviously type 1 driver is the platform dependent driver. What is the reason is type 1 internally depends on ODBC driver. ODBC driver concept applicable only for what? Windows machine. So that's why it is the platform dependent driver. Is it platform independent or not? No, it is not independent. Next, type 2 driver also, it is internally uses native libraries which are implemented in C or C++. That's why it is also not platform independent. Remember, but these two drivers, right? Type 3 and type 4 completely developed in Java. That's why it is a platform independent drivers. Remember that type 3 is the independent, type 4 is also independent driver only. Next, is it database independent or not? Regarding database independent or not? Yes. Type 1 driver database independent, sir. What is the reason is type 1 driver never communicates directly with the database. Internally it is communicating with what? ODBC, via ODBC driver. That's why it is not communicating with the database directly. It is the database independent driver. But type 2 driver internally uses database specific native libraries. That's why it is not the database independent. It is the database dependent only. But what about type 3, sir? Type 3 driver, do you know it never communicates directly with the database. Internally, my middleware server is going to take care. That's why it is the database independent. But type 4 driver, sir, only limitation with the type 4 driver is it is communicating directly with the database. That's why it is the database dependent driver. It is not the independent driver. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, that's all. Next, sir, is it a thin or thick? Is it thin or thick? I hope you people may remember, if the driver requires some extra component to communicate with the database, such type of drivers are called thick drivers, right? If the driver won't require any extra component to communicate with the database, that is called what? Thin driver. Sir, type 4 driver directly communicate with the database without taking support of any other extra component. That's why it is the thin driver. But type 1, type 2, type 3 requires some extra component like ODBC driver or native libraries or middleware server. That's why type 1, 2, 3 are thick drivers. I covered in the last videos clearly, sir. Observe. Sir, is it thin or thick? Yes, type 1, type 2, type 3, all the drivers are thick drivers only. But type 4 driver is the thin driver because it can communicate directly with the database without taking support of any extra component. That's why it is the thin driver, right? Clear, right? Next, and after that, Okay, sir, also known as, what are various other words for type 1 driver, type 2 driver, right? Also known as type 1 driver, also known as JDBC, ODBC bridge driver or bridge driver. Regarding JDBC, ODBC bridge driver or simply bridge driver. Next, type 2 driver, also known as native API, partly Java driver or simply native driver, right? Regarding native API, partly Java driver, it is not completely developed in Java, it is a partly Java driver or native driver. But what about type 3, sir? All Java net protocol driver, all Java net protocol driver or network protocol driver or middleware driver, because internally it uses what? Middleware server. Like, what is the last one? All Java native protocol driver or pure Java driver or thin driver. These are various other words for type 4 driver, right? Are you in a position to understand, right? Okay, that's all. This is a small summary related to types of drivers, right? Sir, now I hope you people you people are getting clarity, right? Sir, almost only types of drivers 10 videos we did, sir. 10 videos we did. Just go through these videos 2 times or 3 times, so that you people can get much clarity on the types of drivers, right? Okay, make sure, sir, if any person even in the middle of sleep also, array please wake up, array please wake up, can you please explain architecture of type 4 driver, or what are advantages and disadvantages of type 3 driver, or which drivers are database independent, database dependent, or which drivers are platform independent, platform dependent. You should be in a position to give left and right almost 10 videos. Whatever I know, each and every point I did in these videos form, sir, just go through that so that you will get much clarity about these JDBC drivers. Clear for all of you, right?